You know that feeling when you're in a room full of people, yet no one seems to notice you're there? That was my life every single day. They say families are supposed to see you for who you are. Mine only saw what I could do for them. My name is Adria Monroe, 29 years old, born and raised in Ashwood, Oregon, a small town where everyone smiles politely and pretends to know your worth. I work for my family's accounting firm Monroe and Associates, a respectable business that my father, Gerald Monroe, built from the ground up. To outsiders, we look perfect, polished, professional, and close-knit. But inside those glass walls, everything is a performance. Before I go on, if you're new here, hit like, subscribe, and share this story, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just about betrayal. It's about finally learning to walk out of the shadows. That morning started like any other. The office buzzed with quiet chatter, the faint hum of printers, and the smell of burnt coffee. My sister Charlotte was leading a client meeting in the main conference room. Through the glass wall, I watched her glide across the room in her cream blazer, confident and radiant, the perfect daughter. I stood behind the copy machine, fixing a paper jam, pretending I didn't hear my mother's voice through the open door. "Charlotte's presentation is impeccable," Helen said, pride dripping from every syllable. "She's exactly what this company needs to represent us," Father chuckled. "That's my girl. She has the Monroe discipline." My name never came up. It rarely did. When I walked in to deliver the financial reports, Charlotte didn't look up. My father gestured for me to place them on the table without interrupting. I obeyed, my heartbeat loud enough to drown out the rest of their conversation. As I turned to leave, Helen called out, not to thank me, but to adjust me. "Adria, your shirt's wrinkled. We can't have you looking unprofessional around clients." "I'll fix it," I murmured. Charlotte smiled faintly, the kind of smile that meant she didn't even register my embarrassment. Outside the conference room, I stopped by the window. The morning sun caught the reflection of my face-tired eyes, faint smudge of coffee on my sleeve. That's when it hit me. I'd spent nearly a decade trying to be seen in a family that only looked right through me. Still, I told myself to keep going. Maybe if I worked harder, stayed later, proved my worth a little more, they'd finally notice. As I turned back toward my cubicle, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother lit up the screen. "Don't forget the box for Charlotte's wedding tomorrow. Bring it straight home. We're counting on you." I exhaled, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. Of course. Even when they did notice me, it was only to give me another task. I had no idea that small request, the box, would be the beginning of everything that came undone. By the time I left the office that evening, the sky above Ashwood was painted in pale gold, the kind of light that made everything look softer than it really was. I drove the short route to my parents' house, half dreading, half determined to survive whatever waited inside. From the driveway, I could already hear my mother's voice slicing through the air. "Careful with those flowers. The hydrangeas are for the rehearsal dinner, not the ceremony." Inside, the living room looked like a boutique had exploded white ribbons, boxes labeled table decor, and two planners frantically taking notes. My sister, Charlotte, was perched on the couch in silk pajamas, scrolling through her phone. "Adria," my mother barked the moment she saw me. "Good, you're here. I need you to drop off this box at your father's office before 7. It has the vendor files and the payment slips for the wedding." I looked down at the heavy silver box beside her. "Isn't this for the reception decor?" She waved a manicured hand. "Some of both. Don't mix things up." Charlotte glanced up, offering a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom's been in full general mode all day," she said. "You know how she gets before big events?" I wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat. "Yeah," I said, forcing a nod. "I remember." Mother snapped again. "Don't stand there. Go help the planner with the seating chart, and Adria wear something nicer tomorrow. No one should confuse you for the staff." Her words stung more than I let show. I walked over to the dining table where name cards were scattered like fallen leaves. I started sorting them alphabetically, but my eyes blurred over the names, lawyers, investors, local officials. No friends of mine. "Adria, you're double-checking the catering list too, right?" My father called from his study. "I don't want another mix-up." "Already did," I said quietly. "Good girl." His tone was approving, but empty like praise given to an assistant, not a daughter. The clock ticked toward 7 as I lifted the silver box, its weight pressing into my palms. I didn't know what was inside, but I knew better than to ask. As I stepped back into the fading light, the house behind me hummed with excitement, perfect, polished, and utterly foreign. I told myself it was just another errand. I didn't realize then that this box would become the fuse to everything waiting to burn. By the time I got home, the sun had slipped behind the fir trees, turning Ashwood into a quiet watercolor of orange and gray. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink, a side effect of working too much and living too little. I set the silver box on the kitchen counter, careful not to drop it. It had felt heavier than it should have, not just in weight, but in meaning. I kicked off my shoes and sank into the chair by my small dining table, opening my laptop to finish an end-of-month report. The glow of the screen cast a soft light over the papers scattered around me, expense sheets, tax files, and client ledgers that my father had asked me to review before the weekend. It was supposed to be routine, except something was off. There were transfers between the company's accounts and several names I didn't recognize: Ward Capital LLC, Redfield Holdings, Caspian Realty. They weren't regular clients. At first I thought maybe they were vendors for the wedding, but the numbers were too high, too precise. 250,000, 175,000, 312,000, every transaction perfectly rounded, too perfect. I scrolled back through the logs, my chest tightening. Each payment was authorized by my father's login and confirmed by my sister's. My cursor hovered over the date column. The last one had been yesterday, the same day I'd been told to deliver the box. A chill crawled up my spine. I whispered to myself, why would Charlotte sign off on company funds 2 days before her wedding? The question hung in the air, unanswered. I reached for my phone, tempted to call her, but stopped. She'd only tell me not to worry. She always did. "Dad's got it under control," she'd say, the same way she had when the IRS sent us that audit letter last year. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. I clicked on the document folder marked Vendor Payments, Event. Inside were contracts, receipts, and one encrypted file labeled Ward Reconciliation. I hesitated before entering my password. The screen blinked twice, then opened. Rows and rows of numbers filled the page, but the header made my stomach drop. Personal liability offset, Monroe family account. It wasn't a vendor file, it was a transfer log one that looked suspiciously like money laundering. My fingers froze on the keyboard. I could almost hear my father's voice from years ago. "Never ask questions you don't want the answers to, Adria. Just do your part." I shut the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My pulse thundered in my ears. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was some sort of corporate shuffle I didn't understand. But deep down, I knew better. The silver box on my counter gleamed under the kitchen light. I'd carried it out of my parents' house like it was nothing, but what if it was everything? I texted my mom, "Everything's ready for tomorrow." "The box is safe." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows like restless fingers. I rubbed my arms and tried to focus on the numbers again, but the more I looked, the more wrong it all felt. Something wasn't adding up, not in the accounts, not in my family, not in the story they'd been selling the world for years. And I had a feeling that by tomorrow, I'd find out exactly why. By morning, the unease from the night before hadn't faded. It clung to me like the fog that settled over Ashwood, heavy, cold, and impossible to shake. I barely slept, replaying the numbers, those strange transfers looping in my head like an unfinished song. Still, I told myself not to overthink. It was Charlotte's wedding weekend. Nothing could go wrong. That was the unspoken law of our family appear perfect, even when everything underneath is cracking. I slipped into a navy dress, tied my hair back, and loaded the silver box into the passenger seat. It caught the morning light, glinting like a secret. The drive to my parents' house took 15 minutes. I parked behind a line of catering vans and wedding planners bustling about, everyone moving as if the world depended on their timelines. Inside, the scent of lilies and fresh paint filled the air, too polished, too staged. "Adria, where have you been?" My mother's voice sliced through the noise before I even made it to the living room. She stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, her face painted with urgency. "I came straight here," I said, holding up the box. "You asked me to bring this." "Good. Take it to your father's study." "He needs those files for the vendor payments." She turned away before I could ask anything else. I walked toward the study, balancing the box carefully. My father was on the phone, pacing behind his mahogany desk. "No, it has to be today," he snapped. "We can't delay that transfer, do you understand? Today." He turned when he saw me. "Leave it on the table, sweetheart. I'll get to it." His tone was flat automatic. I nodded, setting it down beside his laptop. The screen was open to a spreadsheet I wasn't meant to see. Numbers scrolled past millions this time, not thousands. "Dad," I started, my voice hesitant, "are these all wedding expenses?" He froze for half a beat, then forced a chuckle. "You don't need to worry about that, Adria. Focus on helping your mother. The guests will start arriving soon." The dismissal stung more than the words. I wanted to ask again, but something in his eyes warned me not to. Hours passed in a blur of flowers, fabric, and frustration. By late afternoon, I went back to the study to grab the box. It was gone. "Mom?" I called out. "Where's the silver box I brought this morning?" She turned sharply, her smile tightening. "What do you mean, where is it? You had one job, Adria." "I dropped it off with Dad. He told me to leave it in his study." "Well, it's not there now," she snapped. "The florist is waiting for those vendor payments. What did you do with it?" Heat rose to my cheeks. "I didn't touch it again. Maybe Dad—" "Don't blame your father for your mistakes." Her voice grew sharp enough to draw glances from nearby staff. I stood frozen, pulse racing. That same fog from the morning pressed in again, only this time it wasn't just in my head. It was in their eyes. Something was missing, and it wasn't just the box. It was trust, maybe even truth itself. And I had a sinking feeling I'd be the one they'd bury with the blame. My mother's voice was the first sound that broke the tension. Sharp, accusatory. It cut through the air like glass shattering. "The box is missing, Adria. How could you lose something that important?" I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by half-dressed tables, flower petals, and panic. The wedding rehearsal was less than an hour away, and the house had become a stage of chaos. Planners whispered behind clipboards. My father's office door slammed. "I didn't lose it," I said quietly, my throat dry. "I left it in Dad's study this morning. He told me to—" "Enough!" My father's voice thundered from behind me. When I turned, Adria Monroe stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, anger twisting his features. "Your mother is right. You've been careless for years, and now you've gone too far." My chest tightened. "You can't seriously believe I can and I do," he interrupted. "You've embarrassed this family over and over again. Always half prepared, always distracted. If you weren't my daughter, you'd have been fired a long time ago." Those words, "if you weren't my daughter," landed like a punch. I felt my stomach drop. Around us, even the planners went silent. "I didn't do anything wrong," I said, but my voice trembled. "You're blaming me for something you don't even understand." "Don't you dare talk back to your father," my mother hissed. She turned to the planners. "Take a break, everyone." They scattered quickly, grateful to escape. When the door shut, my mother's tone changed, not softer, just colder. "You've been a burden for years, Adria. Do you think we don't see how jealous you are of your sister? Always finding ways to ruin things." "I'm not jealous," I said, but the tears in my voice made it sound like a lie. Charlotte appeared then, drawn by the noise. She stood on the staircase in her white rehearsal dress, clutching a phone in her hand. For a moment, I hoped she'd say something, anything to stop them. She didn't. "Mom, Dad, maybe she just misplaced it," she offered finally, her voice light, diplomatic. "Let's not ruin the weekend." Her calm only made things worse. My father turned to her, weary but grateful. "Charlotte, you shouldn't have to defend her, not today." Then he looked at me. "The greatest gift you could give your sister is to disappear for once. Do you understand?" Disappear. It wasn't just a cruel phrase, it was a verdict. A sentence. I felt something inside me snap, quiet but final. I'd spent my whole life chasing scraps of approval, and this was the reward. "Fine," I whispered. "You want me gone? Consider it done." My mother scoffed. "Don't be dramatic, Adria." "I'm not," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm finally listening to you." For a moment, no one moved. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. Then I turned, grabbed my purse, and walked toward the front door. My father called after me. "Adria." But not with worry, just frustration. Outside, the air was sharp and damp. The sky hung low and gray, as if the whole world had turned against color. I walked to my car without looking back. Inside the car, I rested my hands on the steering wheel. They were shaking, not from fear, but from a strange, liberating rage. My phone buzzed again and again, calls from my mother, my sister, then silence. I didn't answer any of them. The rain started, slow at first, then heavier. Each drop streaked down the windshield like punctuation marks on a story I'd never meant to write. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. All I could think of was that silver box and the files I'd seen the night before, the perfect transactions, the flawless lies. My father's voice echoed in my head. "If you weren't my daughter..." Maybe that was the truth. Maybe I never had been. Not really. I drove home in silence, every mile a layer of distance between me and them. When I parked in front of my apartment, the street was empty, washed clean by the storm. I unlocked the door, kicked off my heels, and stood in the doorway for a long time. The echo of their voices still clung to me, but underneath it, something new stirred, a calm, dangerous kind of clarity. They wanted me to disappear, and for once in my life I was going to do exactly what they asked. When I got home that night, the rain hadn't stopped. It drummed against the windows like an impatient visitor that refused to leave. I was soaked to the bone, mascara smudged, heels in my hand. I should have felt empty after walking away from my family, but instead I felt wired, like my body hadn't caught up with what my heart already knew. The apartment was dim, quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. My coat left a trail of rainwater as I dropped my purse on the counter. That's when I saw it, the silver box. Still there, unopened. My breath caught. If they were right, if I'd somehow lost it, then what the hell was it doing here? I wiped my hands on a towel and lifted the lid. Inside were several neatly stacked folders, a small black USB drive taped to the underside, and a few sealed envelopes marked vendor expenses. But the USB drive, that small, ordinary-looking thing, called to me. I hesitated for a long minute. Part of me knew opening it would make everything worse. But another part, the part that was done being obedient, clicked it into my laptop anyway. A folder appeared on the screen. Private G. Monroe. I opened it. Rows of spreadsheets and PDFs filled the monitor. At first glance, they looked like normal accounting files. But the deeper I went, the uglier it got. Offshore transfers, multiple shell corporations, payment authorizations signed not only by my father, but by Charlotte and Ethan Ward, her fiancé. Each document was like a slap in the face. There it was, in black and white. Redfield Holdings, Monroe & Associates, Ward Capital LLC. 3 names, 3 hands. 1 operation. My throat tightened. My family wasn't just cutting corners. They were laundering money systematically, precisely, and under the company's name. I leaned back, staring at the glow of the screen. My pulse roared in my ears. Then came the final blow, an email thread labeled Audit Mitigation Plan. The latest message was from my father to Ethan, dated 2 days ago. Once the transfer's clear, I'll have Adria deliver the drive. She'll think it's part of the wedding files. Keep her away from the reconciliation logs. She can't know what's inside. I covered my mouth, but a sound still escaped me, a low, broken laugh. So that was it. They'd used me, the errand girl, the invisible daughter, the one who never questioned orders. I had carried the weapon that could destroy them, thinking it was nothing but paperwork. My stomach turned. I opened the remaining folders, scanning quickly. There were letters to investors, falsified receipts, even charity donations rerouted to private accounts. Years of deceit buried under the Monroe name. A notification popped up on my screen, an incoming call from Mom. I froze, watching the phone buzz across the table. Her name pulsed like a warning. I didn't answer. After the 4th missed call, a message appeared. "You've done enough damage, Adria." "Don't make it worse." My hands trembled as I read it. How did she already know? The USB drive gleamed under the light, small but powerful proof of everything they'd built on lies. For years, I'd been desperate for them to notice me. Now I finally mattered, just not in the way I ever wanted. The laptop fan whirred louder, the only sound in the apartment. I sat there staring at the evidence, and something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done chasing approval. Done being their scapegoat. I ejected the USB, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it inside the drawer where I kept my passport and college diploma, the only 2 things that still felt like mine. The rain outside slowed to a soft drizzle. For a moment, the silence felt heavy but clean, like the air after a storm. They wanted me to disappear. Maybe it was time I did, but not the way they expected. Because now, I had something they didn't. The truth. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the spreadsheets again, the clean columns of numbers, the careful signatures, my father's name beside my sister's. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to hide, and I wasn't going to let them drag me down with them. The rain had stopped, but Ashwood still smelled like wet earth and smoke. I drove 2 hours north to Portland, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had one name in mind, Diana Cole, a lawyer who used to handle compliance issues for one of our clients. She'd once told me, "If you ever need someone to protect you from your own people, call me." I used to think it was a joke. It wasn't. Her office was on the top floor of an old brick building downtown, the kind of place where everything felt both sharp and safe. The receptionist led me in, and Diana stood from behind her desk, a tall woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a mind that probably never rested. "Adria," she said, studying my face, "you look like you've just walked out of a storm." I managed a thin smile. "I did. And I brought one with me." She gestured for me to sit. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the missing box, the accusations, the USB drive, the offshore transfers. Every word felt heavier than the last. When I finished, she leaned back, hands clasped under her chin. "I had a feeling something like this would happen with your family," she said quietly. "Gerald's been juggling accounts for years. He's good at making things look legitimate until they aren't." The confirmation hit harder than I expected. "So I'm not crazy," I whispered. "Not even close." She glanced at her computer, then back at me. "You did the right thing by not confronting them. Right now, you're sitting on evidence that could ruin them and save you." "I don't want revenge," I said. "I just want to be free of all this." "That's still going to take strategy." She opened a legal pad and started writing. First, we freeze any joint accounts you have access to. That protects you from liability. Then, I want you to meet with someone I trust, a financial specialist named Marcus Hale. He'll review the data you found and make sure your name stays clean when the truth comes out. I nodded slowly, the weight in my chest easing just a little. And if they find out I came to you? Her smile was almost maternal. Then they'll realize the daughter they underestimated finally learned how to fight smart. I exhaled, a shaky laugh slipping through. I've never fought anyone before. Diana leaned forward. You've been fighting your whole life, Adria. You just called it surviving. The words cracked something open inside me. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding everything together until that moment. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry. Not here, not yet. Diana handed me a folder. Take this. It has the documents you'll need to authorize the freezes, and I'll set up a meeting with Marcus this afternoon. When I stepped back into the daylight, the city noise hit me like a heartbeat fast, alive, promising movement. For the first time in years, I wasn't just running away from something. I was running toward freedom. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed, Mom. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. I didn't answer. Not this time. They wanted me silent. Now my silence was going to cost them everything. By the time I left Portland, the city was draped in twilight. My meeting with Diana and Marcus had ended hours earlier, but their words still echoed in my head. You're not running away, Adria. You're reclaiming your life. It didn't feel like reclaiming. It felt like cutting the last string that tethered me to everything I'd ever known. I'd spent the afternoon closing what pieces of my life I could, selling my apartment to a quick sale agency, transferring what little money I had left into a new account, and packing 2 suitcases, one for clothes, one for the past. My laptop, the USB, and the folder Diana had given me stayed close, zipped inside my carry-on like a heartbeat I couldn't lose. At the airport, I moved through security half aware, half numb. Families laughed around me, dragging luggage plastered with stickers, heading toward warm reunions. I envied them, not their destinations, but the simple privilege of belonging somewhere. The terminal smelled like cinnamon pretzels and jet fuel. Over the loudspeaker, a voice announced my flight. Portland to Dallas, continuing to Savannah. Savannah. The name felt like a whisper-soft, unfamiliar, full of promise. I'd picked it on instinct while scrolling through maps with Diana. She'd said, "It's quiet there. People mind their own business." Perfect for a restart. As I waited to board, my phone buzzed again. Mom, then Dad, then Charlotte. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my messages and typed one line before deleting it. You wanted me gone. I listened. I turned the phone off and tucked it deep in my bag. When I finally boarded, I took the window seat near the back. Outside, the runway lights stretched like a trail of tiny stars. The engines roared, and the vibration rumbled through my chest. As the plane lifted off, Oregon shrank beneath the clouds, small, gray, and distant. For the first time in my life, no one knew where I was going. Not my family, not my coworkers, not anyone. And that thought didn't scare me. It freed me. I watched the city lights fade until they looked like scattered embers from a dying fire. Somewhere above the hum of the engines, I whispered to myself, they told me to disappear. So I did. And as the clouds swallowed the last glimpse of Ashwood, I promised I'd never go back, not until I was someone they could never bury again. When the plane touched down in Savannah, the air felt different, thicker, warmer, alive with a kind of softness Oregon never had. The scent of salt and magnolia drifted through the terminal doors as I stepped out, clutching the handle of my suitcase like it was the only solid thing left in my life. I'd slept maybe an hour during the overnight flight, my dreams tangled with images of spreadsheets, arguments, and storm clouds over Ashwood. But when I saw the low skyline of the coastal city, washed in early sunlight, something in me unclenched. For the first time in years, I didn't feel watched. The taxi driver, A man with a deep southern drawl asked where I was headed. I gave him an address, scribbled on a rental listing, a small cottage near the marshes, month-to-month lease, no background check. He nodded without question, and that alone felt like mercy. The drive wound through tree-lined streets draped in Spanish moss. Every turn looked like a postcard, soft, green, and forgiving. By the time we reached the cottage, the cicadas had started their morning chorus. The place was old, but charming. Peeling white paint, a porch swing hanging crooked, a view of the marsh stretching out behind it like a secret no one talked about. Inside, it smelled faintly of wood polish and sea air. The furniture was mismatched, the walls bare, but it was mine, or at least it could be. I unpacked slowly, placing my few belongings where they'd make the space feel less like a rental and more like a refuge. The USB drive went into the top drawer beside my passport. The rest of my life fit neatly into 2 suitcases. When I walked to the nearby cafe to get coffee, the bell above the door jingled softly. The shop was called Tessa's Place, a cozy corner filled with potted ferns and the hum of quiet chatter. Behind the counter stood Tessa Rivera, a woman in her mid-40s with copper curls and laugh lines that hinted at a hard-earned peace. "New face," she said with a smile. "You just move here?" "Yesterday," I said, taking a seat at the counter. "Still figuring out where here even is." Tessa laughed, sliding a mug toward me. "That makes 2 of us, honey. Been figuring that out for 10 years. Something about her voice, steady but kind, made my shoulders drop. For the first time in weeks, I found myself smiling back. We talked for a while, about nothing and everything, how the humidity ruined your hair, how the tourists came for the history but stayed for the hush of the water. When she asked my name, I hesitated. Then the words came naturally, like breathing. "Monroe Adria," I said, reversing the order, letting it roll off my tongue like a new identity trying itself on for size. "Well, Monroe Adria," she said, tilting her head, "welcome to Savannah. You look like someone who needed a soft landing." I sipped my coffee, staring out at the slow-moving street. The world felt different here, slower, quieter, like time was giving me a second chance. That afternoon, I set up my laptop and opened a new email account under my new name. Within hours, I found my first freelance project marketing work for a small boutique downtown. It wasn't much, but it was mine, untouched by the Monroe legacy. As the sun dipped over the marsh that evening, turning the water to gold, I realized something. I hadn't escaped. I'd arrived. And for the first time, that felt enough. The days in Savannah began to take shape like slow-moving waves, steady, rhythmic, healing. Morning coffee at Tessa's Place, quiet evenings spent working on marketing campaigns from my little porch overlooking the marsh. For a while, peace felt possible. Then, one morning, peace shattered. I was halfway through drafting an email for a client when my phone buzzed with a notification from an old coworker back in Oregon. "Are you okay?" "I saw what your mom posted." My stomach tightened. I hadn't spoken to anyone from Ashwood since I left. I opened my browser and typed my mother's name before I could stop myself. There it was, her Facebook post, public for the entire town to see. "Our youngest daughter, Adria, betrayed her family and stole confidential company assets. We ask for prayers as we recover from this devastation." Thousands of views, dozens of comments, sympathy. Gossip. Speculation. One of the top comments came from my father. "We trusted her, but greed changes people. The truth will come out." The truth. I stared at the words until they blurred. My heart pounded so loud I barely heard the soft knock on my door. Tessa peeked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned the screen toward her. She read in silence, then let out a low whistle. "They're painting you as the villain, huh?" "Apparently I'm a thief now." My voice cracked despite my effort to sound detached. "They're making it sound like I took everything from them." Tessa handed me a mug. "People like that control is their currency. When you stop giving it, they'll spend your name instead." I managed a weak smile. You're wiser than you look. I've earned the wrinkles, she said, patting my shoulder. So what are you gonna do? Fight back? I shook my head. Not yet. They want me to panic. I won't give them that. That night, I opened my laptop again, not to read their lies, but to collect proof of them, screenshots, dates. Every accusation. My fingers shook, but my resolve didn't. Then an email arrived from an unknown address. The subject line read, "They're in trouble. You need to see this." Inside was a link to a news article from the Oregonian, Monroe and Associates under federal review for financial irregularities. A photo of my father, looking grim outside the courthouse, filled the screen. My mother stood beside him, her composure cracking. Charlotte was nowhere in sight. I sat back, heart racing, not with fear, but with clarity. They'd tried to bury me under lies, but in doing so, they'd dug their own grave. Outside, thunder rolled over the marsh. I looked out into the night, coffee cooling in my hands, and whispered to the quiet air, "They wanted the world to believe I was guilty. Fine. Let the world watch what happens when the truth finally wakes up." The morning after the article broke, Savannah felt unusually still. The air hung heavy with humidity, and the marsh outside my window looked like glass calm on the surface, hiding the chaos beneath. My phone, silent for days, had come back to life with notifications. The Oregonian headline glared at me from every screen. Monroe and Associates under federal investigation. Founder Gerald Monroe accused of falsifying financial records, tax evasion, and money laundering. Sources confirm investigation extends to family members. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It was happening, the collapse I'd felt building for years. I scrolled further. There were photos. My father outside the courthouse, jaw tight, his expensive suit clinging to him under the flash of cameras. My mother beside him, sunglasses hiding her eyes but not the tremor in her posture. Behind them, the company's logo hung on the glass doors like a ghost. And Charlotte, she wasn't there. The news anchors called it a stunning fall from grace. Commentators speculated, analysts dissected. Every outlet replayed clips from my parents' charity galas and community awards. The words respectable family were now always followed by alleged criminal enterprise. I should have felt vindicated. I should have smiled. Instead, my chest ached in ways I didn't expect. When I arrived at Tessa's place, she already had the TV turned to a local Savannah station. "You seeing this?" she asked, gesturing to the screen. I nodded, taking the coffee she'd poured without asking. "Yeah, it's surreal." Tessa studied me for a moment. "You okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "They destroyed me publicly, and now the truth's destroying them. I thought it'd feel like justice, but it just feels heavy." "That's because you're decent," she said. "You never wanted revenge. You just wanted peace." Her words hit harder than she probably meant them to. Peace, that elusive thing I'd been chasing since childhood. The TV anchor's voice cut through our silence. "Sources say the investigation began after an anonymous whistleblower submitted internal documents to the Federal Bureau." My stomach tightened. "The USB." Tessa glanced at me, brow raised. "That was you, wasn't it?" I didn't answer, but the look on my face gave me away. She smiled softly. "Good for you, sweetheart. Some storms are meant to cleanse." Later that afternoon, another headline appeared online. Charlotte Monroe's fiancé, Ethan Ward, withdraws from engagement amid scandal. My sister's picture followed the same polished smile, now paired with eyes that looked hollow. The caption below quoted her statement. "I had no knowledge of my family's financial misconduct. My heart is with them in this difficult time." I wanted to believe her, but the files had told a different story. My laptop pinged again, an email from an unfamiliar address, charlotte.m@privatehost.com. Subject, "You win." "Adria, I don't know what you've done, but it's over. Everything's gone. Dad's license, Mom's social circle, my career. Are you happy now? I stared at the screen, anger rising, not because of what she said, but because even now she didn't understand. I typed back, my hands steady. No, Charlotte, I'm not happy, I'm free. I didn't hit send. I just sat there reading the words until they blurred, then closed the laptop. Some things didn't need to be answered. That evening, the sunset over the Savannah marsh turned everything gold and crimson. It looked like the world was on fire, but finally quiet about it. I sat on my porch, coffee cooling beside me, and thought about the irony how my parents had built their empire on appearances, and how quickly appearances vanished when the truth surfaced. My phone buzzed one last time. A voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play. My father's voice. Adria, I don't know if you'll even hear this. They froze our accounts. The house. It's being seized. Your mother's not well. A pause. I said terrible things to you. I was wrong. But please don't let this be the end. I let the message finish, the weight of his words sinking in. For years, I'd begged for acknowledgement. Now that it came, it was wrapped in ruin. The phone slipped from my hand onto the table. I looked out toward the fading horizon, where the light met the water, and whispered to the empty air. This isn't the end, Dad. It's the truth finally catching up. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing beneath their name, I was standing beyond it. The night after my father's voicemail, the marsh was unusually quiet. Even the frogs seemed to know silence was safer than sound. I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, the glow of my laptop lighting my face. I hadn't planned to check my email again, not tonight, not after hearing his voice break for the first time in my life. But something in me needed to know how far the wreckage had spread. I opened my inbox. Dozens of subject lines screamed at me. Breaking news. Monroe Empire collapses. Charlotte Monroe speaks out. Public reaction to financial scandal. And then one stood out, small and trembling in the middle of the chaos. From Charlotte Monroe. Subject: I'm sorry. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. Then I clicked. Adria, I don't even know where to start. The investigators have been calling non-stop. Ethan left, Mom's barely leaving the house, and Dad, he's different. Smaller. I can't recognize him anymore. I keep thinking if things hadn't gone this way, maybe we could have fixed it before it exploded. But I know that's not fair. Maybe you did what you had to. Maybe I deserved this for staying silent. I just need you to know I'm sorry. For everything I didn't say, for not standing up for you when I should have. I wish we could go back, but I know we can't. Charlotte. I read it twice, the second time slower. It wasn't an apology that erased the past, but it wasn't a lie either. I stared out at the marsh, where the moon shimmered across the water. For years, I'd wanted to hear her admit it, to say out loud that I wasn't crazy, that the pain I carried had a shape and a cause. But now that I had it, the anger didn't come. Just a strange, soft ache. I started typing a reply. Charlotte, you didn't destroy me. You just stood too close to the people who did. Maybe we both made peace with the wrong kind of silence. I hope one day you find yours for real. My fingers paused over the keyboard. Then, slowly, I deleted every line. Some things didn't need to be answered. Instead, I whispered into the night, I forgive you. The words felt lighter than I expected. They floated into the air like ash gone before I could second-guess them. Inside, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number this time. They're issuing arrest warrants tomorrow. For your parents. The case is airtight. M.H. Marcus Hale, Diana's colleague. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The story had already written itself. Closing my laptop, I sat back and let the night wrap around me. For the first time, I realized forgiveness didn't mean returning to what was broken. It meant no longer bleeding from it. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain and the distant sound of waves. Somewhere, a heron called across the marsh. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered, half to myself, half to the ghosts of who we used to be. They finally learned what silence costs. And I finally learned what it's worth. I went inside, turned off my phone, and left the past to answer itself. The morning after Charlotte's email, Savannah woke to rain. Not the stormy kind, just a steady, patient drizzle that turned the streets silver and soft. I walked to Tessa's place with my coat pulled tight, the kind of walk that clears your mind without asking permission. Inside, the cafe smelled like cinnamon and warmth. The usual hum of chatter was replaced by the quiet rustle of newspapers and the hiss of the espresso machine. Tessa was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, humming to herself. She looked up when she saw me and smiled. "Well, look who finally came out of hiding," she teased, sliding a cup toward me before I could even order. "Black coffee, extra shot, right?" I nodded, a small laugh escaping me. "You know me too well." She leaned her elbows on the counter. "Word around town is you're officially a local now." "You planning to stay?" The question lingered between us. For weeks, I'd been avoiding it, afraid that choosing to stay meant admitting the life I left behind was truly over. But now the thought didn't sting. It felt possible. "I think I might," I said finally. "It's quiet here. No one asks questions they don't need answers to." Tessa chuckled. "Yeah, Savannah's good at letting people rebuild." The kind of place where your ghosts learn to keep to themselves. Her words made me smile, but before I could answer, the TV above the counter caught my attention. The morning news was on, muted, showing footage from Oregon, the Monroe estate behind yellow tape, my parents escorted out in handcuffs. The headline read, "Monroe family faces federal charges." Tessa glanced at the screen, then back at me. "That your folks?" I took a sip of coffee, steadying myself. "Yeah, that's them." She nodded slowly. "Must be strange seeing it like that." "It is," I said, watching the image flicker. "But maybe it's the only way it was ever going to end." Tessa studied me for a moment. "You don't look angry." "I was," I admitted, "for years, but anger's heavy. I got tired of carrying it." She smiled softly, sliding a napkin toward me. "Then put it down, sweetheart. You've earned your peace." Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. I sat there, hands wrapped around my mug, watching droplets chase each other down the window pane. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. For once, it had already fallen, and I was still standing. The rain had stopped by afternoon, leaving Savannah washed clean, gleaming under a soft golden sky. The air carried that sweet, earthy scent that only follows a long storm, the smell of renewal. I left Tessa's place with my coat draped over my arm and started down River Street, where the cobblestones glistened under the fading sun. The world around me moved at its own calm rhythm, tourists laughing, waves lapping against the pier, the faint sound of jazz spilling from a nearby bar. For the first time in months, I wasn't rushing anywhere. I wasn't running from anyone. I just walked. The breeze tugged at my hair, and I let it. My reflection shimmered faintly in the shop windows I passed. Same face, same eyes, but softer now. Lighter. At the end of the street, I stopped by the water. The river flowed steadily east, pulling the light along with it. Somewhere beyond that horizon was everything I hadn't yet lived, and for once, that didn't scare me. A couple walked by, hand in hand, and the woman smiled at me. I smiled back, realizing that life, even after all its wreckage, had a way of finding balance again. I took one last deep breath of the salty air, turned toward home, and kept walking. Not away this time, but forward. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd lose everything I thought defined me, my family, my home, my place in the world, I would have called it tragedy, but now I see it was transformation. Sometimes the people who teach us to stay silent do it because our truth threatens their comfort. And sometimes walking away isn't about giving up. It's about choosing yourself over the noise that tried to drown you. I learned that peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with applause or forgiveness from others. It comes quietly, in small moments, like the first cup of coffee that tastes like freedom, or the first morning you wake up and don't check your phone for approval. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about letting them off the hook. It's about unhooking yourself from the weight of what they did. If you've ever been told you're too quiet, too weak, too invisible, remember this: silence can be power when you choose it for yourself. And when you finally decide to walk forward, the world has no choice but to make room for you.